Regarding Admiral Yi Sun-sin, this is a regular class that we make sure to dedicate time to once a year. April 28th is also Admiral Yi's birthday, and if we truly understand our national hero, in fact, even someone like me has lived with a genuine respect for Admiral Yi Sun-sin during my youth, so I hope this becomes a good opportunity, and that our country becomes stronger. All right, let's begin. You must have thought that you respect Admiral Yi Sun-sin. Since everyone here is Korean, you need to know what it means to respect him. It's truly heartbreaking and frustrating that there are so few people who genuinely know. I originally knew that Admiral Yi Sun-sin committed suicide, but raise your hand. Only those who originally knew, quietly raise your hand. Okay. 1 or 2 people? Just people? 2 people? I already know that everyone has disappeared. 2 people. So, because most people don't really know anything right now, the respect itself is almost non-existent, right? Even if they do, it's only at a very shallow level, like shallow water. So I'll change this for you. So watch closely. You've all seen the movie The Admiral, Roaring Currents, right? As soon as the Admiral starts, there's a scene where the national hero is continuously tortured, right? Why did they keep torturing someone who did nothing but save the country? It was out of jealousy and envy of his achievements, right? By the incompetent court officials and the small-minded King Seonjo. They accused him of treason, and it wasn't just General Yi Sun-sin. They oppressed and imprisoned other figures like Kim Deok-ryong, the righteous army leader, and General Kwak Jae-woo. When he was imprisoned, his mother passed away. At that time, he was supposed to observe a 3-year mourning period, but he couldn't even be there for her last moments, making him a disobedient son. The Japanese sent assassins to break General Yi Sun-sin's spirit, killing his most beloved, or third son, and during his torture, Won Gyun's arrogance led to the destruction of over 200 ships, leaving only 12 as behind. In a panic, King Seonjo called Yi Sun-sin back and reinstated him as the naval commander. If I am given command of the Joseon Navy again, I will fight with a glad heart. Leading his battered body across the 8 provinces, he encouraged the panicked people and gathered the soldiers who had fled. The great victory achieved just 60 days later is known as the Battle of Myeongnang.
I still have 12 ships left, in total. If we fight with all our might, it is indeed something we can do. As long as I am alive, the enemies...
It's incredible. I said that General Yi Sun-sin committed suicide, and I'll explain why step by step. In the annals of the Joseon dynasty, it mentions that he wore armor several times while sleeping. Why would he wear such heavy armor uncomfortably while sleeping? In a situation where he always had to fight against overwhelming odds, he probably wanted to set an example for his subordinates and instill a sense of always being prepared, thinking that his body was not his own, but belonged to the nation. With such thoughts, right, the person who often slept in heavy armor during the final battle of Noryang removed his armor and helmet in the middle of the battle. Was he fighting at the very front or the very back? He had to command from the back while overseeing the entire situation, right? Of course, during the Battle of Myeongnang, since everyone fled, he had no choice but to fight at the front initially and call his allies to join. But in the final Battle of Noryang, he should have been shooting from the back. Despite being a military genius, someone who could be called a genius countless times, it was as if he forgot all his strategies. From the middle of the battle, he removed his armor and helmet, and the flagship went to the front, beating the drum loudly. What was he asking for? Was he asking to be killed? To kill a person with a matchlock gun at that time, the effective range was about 80 meters, and it would be fatal if it hit a vital spot. However, the general was hit in the left, chest by a matchlock bullet, and it didn't just stay in his body. It pierced through his back and exited. This indicates a physical phenomenon that occurs when hit at a range of less than 20 to 30 meters without armor. Did the general even see the fuse burning on the matchlock gun of the enemy who shot him? And at the age of 54, he committed suicide. Do you understand why the hero took his own life? Even if he won here, it wouldn't be a triumphant return. They would find a way to accuse him of treason and kill him. There was no mother or son waiting for him back home, Right. He decided to die as a hero who saved his people. It's heartbreaking. Do you want to become king? Or would you rather commit suicide? Could General Yi Sun-sin be king? Of course, he could have. He had control over more than 70% of the military power. He had the people's support. If he had overthrown King Seonjo, it would have been over. But why didn't he do that? He probably hated the idea of fighting among his own people. If he disliked that, then the Ming Dynasty's naval admiral, Chen Lin, wrote a long letter to the emperor right after the Battle of Myeongnyang, recommending that Yi Sun-sin be made a vassal. The Ming emperor had already decided to give Yi Sun-sin the highest military command. If he had wanted to live a life of national glory, he could have easily lived in a great nation, right? But he didn't want that either. He simply died as a hero. For the sake of the nation, just thinking about him makes my heart ache. There was a drama called The Immortal Yi Sun-sin on KBS a while ago. And even though I was busy, I watched the very last part of the final episode. Do you know why I watched it? Because I was very curious about how they handled General Yi Sun-sin's death. But fortunately, they did it well. What did he say when he passed away? Do not let my death be known to the enemies. This is not something a human can say at the moment of death. As a psychologist, I should analyze this, but look, when humans die, they should claim their achievements. You know Nelson, who became famous for defeating the Spanish Armada, right? What did Nelson say when he was dying? Now I have done my duty. Isn't that impressive, right? This is how humans claim their achievements. Even ordinary people would boast about their deeds before dying, wouldn't they? Admiral Yi Sun-sin didn't say a word about his achievements, even at the moment of death. Inform my death to the enemies. But can a human say such things while pierced and passing through here, God? No, right? He had already prepared for a suicide note, and then said those words. Do you understand? At the age of 54, the hero committed suicide. Dear Myung-ryang. There's a scene where the sailors, exhausted and collapsed, are talking to each other. It's actually an unnecessary scene, but the director included it. Got it.
Will our descendants know that we went through such hardships? If they don't, they are truly ignorant kids. Goodbye.
That's the message. The director of the movie, The Admiral, Roaring Currents, delivered to our nation. Have you heard of Wakizaka Yasuharu? During the Japanese invasions of Korea, he was a Japanese general who achieved great feats. And in the Battle of Yongan, he annihilated 50,000 with just 2,000 soldiers. It's quite remarkable. No matter how formidable the Japanese forces were, and even if our discipline was in disarray, it's still quite an achievement, even if only to some extent. Makisaka Yasuharu receives a special mission from Toyotomi Hideyoshi. What is the special mission? Kill Yi Sun-sin. So, where did the elite Japanese forces gather? Under the supreme commander, Wakizaka Yasuharu. Hansando Island. Got it. You know what it is, right? The Battle of Hansando. They all get wiped out. Out of 9,000, about 8,900 died, right? Among the barely surviving 100 or so, there was the greatest commander, Wakizaka Yasuharu. He must have had many thoughts, right? If we expand on some of the writings he left behind, I did not know Yi Sun-sin. I just thought of him as some general from Joseon who had won a few times. But that one encounter with Yi Sun-sin that I experienced, he was unlike anyone else. I was trembling with fear, unable to eat for several days, and as a commander who had to continue participating in the war. What kind of plan and mindset should I have when fighting? Can you believe that this is the same person who annihilated 50,000 with just 2,000 soldiers? And if you look at the poems he left behind, the one I fear the most is Yi Sun-sin. The one I hate the most is Yi Sun-sin. The one I despise the most is Yi Sun-sin. The one I admire the most is Yi Sun-sin. The one I respect the most is Yi Sun-sin. And the one I most want to kill is Yi Sun-sin. The one I most want to share tea with is also, it's Yi Sun-sin. Do you feel something? The direct descendants of Wakizaka Yasuharu and the cadet delegation from the Japanese Naval Academy come every year on April 28th, the birthday of Admiral Yi Sun-sin, to the waters of Tongyong in our country to hold a memorial service. Sometimes I genuinely think like this. They continue to honor and remember their enemy commander for over 400 years, trying to ingrain it in their hearts and subconscious. Meanwhile, the descendants here watch just one movie and don't understand the spirit of their great ancestors, which is why they end up fighting among themselves. The British Naval Academy has an immense sense of pride. Why? Because we are the descendants of Nelson. If you go there, there are various monuments at the school, and among them, there is such a monument. Who was the greatest naval admiral in the history of the world? They wrote Yi Sun-sin. It's not something we gifted to them. The country that doesn't know this is the country of his descendants. Truly. Among those who studied around the world, would you like to say something? What is considered the biggest event in modern Japanese history? There is the Meiji Restoration, also known as the Meiji Ishin. The Meiji Restoration is about a Japanese hero named Sakamoto Ryoma. He initiated a revolution at the age of 28. It seems like Japan quickly moved towards a centralized world. What kind of such... This hero, Sakamoto Ryoma, realized that if the country's status wasn't properly organized, it would end up being trampled by Western powers. He carried out such actions, and when I was 31, I had a dead body in my hand. We didn't have such a hero in our country, and that's why we were completely overrun without having the foundation for modernization. One of the events that people around the world regard as a significant shock is Japan's victory in the Russo-Japanese War. From May 27 to 28, 1905, Japan, which was only a third the size, completely annihilated Russia's Baltic fleet, which was reigning as the world's strongest. That's an incredible feat. What was the name of the British Prime Minister at the time? Winston. Seo Chili. They thought Japan was just a barbaric country that made pottery, but now they had no choice but to acknowledge otherwise. However, an incredible event occurred, and then, what is the name of the person who led this victory? The name of the Japanese Hode heroic general is Togo Heiichiro. This Togo Heiichiro is the god of the sun in Japan. He is revered as the god of the sea. But then, a celebration was held for this figure. Isn't it more meaningful than his own birthday? At that time, a journalist asked, with General Togo, how does it compare to Nelson in England? He was asked to evaluate himself. Togo laughed heartily and said, isn't Nelson the one who intercepted the Spanish Armada with a fleet of similar size? I am the one who annihilated the Baltic fleet with a fleet one-third the size. Don't make comparisons. Another journalist then asked, how about comparing you to General Yi Sun-sin of Korea? That's what happened. So, what the god of war said to that reporter about the number of floating people and the teeth of the dogger. Do not dare compare me to the god of war and the god of the sea. Don't compare me to Admiral Yi Sun-sin. He procured all resources on his own and devised all battle plans independently, without any support from the court. He is like a god of war who led every battle to a perfect victory. To compare me to him would be blasphemy against a god. Isn't that remarkable? If you compare me to him, I am nothing more than one of his petty officers. And if he had my fleet, he would have conquered all the seas of the world. This is what Togo Heiichiro said. Isn't that incredible? You understand why I can't just feel overwhelming pride when I hear this, right? Who is this Togo Heiichiro's mentor? It's General Yi Sun-sin. This Japanese person continuously studied and learned from our ancestor, the enemy general. And when he, as a disciple, demonstrated his strength to the world, this country, not knowing its own ancestors, was trampled by them. Who should we blame for this, and to whom should we lament? This country is truly a sad nation. There was an event that made General Yi Sun-sin known worldwide. Who was responsible for this? It was Togo Heiichiro. Cadets from the US Naval Academy went to learn from General Togo. In Japan, so an American officer asked, General Togo, whom do you respect the most? Togo's response was, I always and forever. Most respect General Yi Sun-sin, the hero who saved Joseon from the world. That's how the world came to know what a sad country.